Good evening, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order. It's 6:01 on February 22nd. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen. And please stand as you're able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We are going to begin with public audience tonight. Let me get that pulled up. We have two ways of participating in public audience. The first is in person. So if you want to join our Zoom meeting, you can send an email in advance to Tom Fitzgerald, tfitzgerald@simsbury-ct.gov. Or you can send an email to our town clerk, Erica Butler, and we'll read that email. Her email is ebutler@simsbury-ct.gov. We just have one email tonight. It's from Joan Coe. During the February 8th, 2021 Board of Selectmen meeting, Deputy Selectman Sean Askham, the Kool-Aid Kid, told the taxpayers of Simsbury that they should stand behind him in accepting his reasoning that the town manager, Maria Capriola, has excellent management skills because a ratings agency, Standard & Poor's, S&P, rated our finances worthy of a AAA rating. Was the S&P rating agency aware that the budget reflects a collection rate of 98.5% when the actual collection is 99%, with a $600,000, I assume it's a $600 slush fund overtaxing the taxpayers? Was the S&P rating agency aware that the town manager, Maria Capriola, was instrumental in allotting $110,000 for the Simsbury Performing Arts private organization to erect a fence around the Simsbury Meadows town park as an unbudgeted expense to control the entrance to the SPAC concerts? Was the S&P rating agency aware that there have been many employee grievances against town manager Maria Capriola, alleging the violation of state statutes? Was the S&P rating agency aware of a Hartford Courant article alleging the town manager Maria Capriola's abuse of power? Was the S&P rating agency aware that the Simsbury Farm Special Revenue Fund, which is supposed to be self-sustaining, town manager Maria Capriola passes the shortfall to the taxpayers who are paying for the $100,000 year after year? Is Deputy First Selectman Sean Askham going to take credit for a smoke and mirrors budget with overtaxed residents and one of the highest mill rates in the valley? At the February 8th, 2021 Board of Selectmen meeting, my comments were read, but my attached picture was not shown, a violation of my First Amendment rights. It is alleged that town manager Maria Capriola is not forwarding my pictures or has given direction to First Selectman Eric Wellman not to show my pictures of town activities. This is a complete antithesis of open government. Was the S&P rating agency aware that town manager Maria Capriola does not respect people's First Amendment rights? At the February 8th, 2021 Board of Selectmen meeting, I asked the Board of Selectmen to review the police internal investigation of the vandalized police footlocker. The Board of Selectmen, including Sean Askham, the liaison to the Police Commission, was silent, although he has comments on all other issues. Many officers were interviewed under the Garrity warning that lying will lead to termination. At the end of the investigation, it was determined that it was inconclusive, although most police officers were aware of the officer that lied. The only officer, according to statements made during the interviews, was allegedly Sergeant Thibault, having a red face, used profanities, and stormed out of the room. Another officer reported that we're all trained observers in this profession and alleged Sergeant Thibault's reaction was not someone who is innocent. Why was Chief Bolter not interested in reopening the investigation with all of these allegations of being untruthful when he was eager to terminate an officer for lying about comments made by Chief Bolter that he would be happy if two officers would leave because they didn't meet his expectations? The investigation of the footlocker and the highlights how investigations are weighted by Chief Bolter. It appears Chief Bolter has prosecutorial discretion. December 16th, 2019, Edwin Kosinski, IBPO national representative, sent an email to town manager Maria Capriola, subject Mirror Report, questioning Chief Bolter's discipline log. Ed Kosinski questions town manager Maria Capriola that Chief Bolter conducted an internal investigation into an incident involving Gary Gray at Bradley Airport on a police convention to Las Vegas. However, it was not listed on the log. Gary Gray allegedly was arrested for packing a gun in his luggage. Was Officer Gary Gray disciplined? Was Gary Gray's gun in a secured location prior to placing it in his luggage? The Simsbury Police Department voted overwhelmingly for no confidence in the chief. Town Manager Maria Capriola, in a memorandum of understanding to the police union, states, employees who have contracted COVID-19 or who are quarantined due to COVID-19 may choose to self-quarantine at the Farmington Inn or other lodging designated by the town for up to 14 days. Employees who reside with someone who is positive with COVID-19 may choose to reside temporarily at the Farmington Inn or other lodging designated by the town for up to 14 consecutive days. Were town employees given the same privileges? What was the cost associated with the MOU? Were all COVID-19 protocols followed in Simsbury for distribution to people receiving the vaccine? All of my comments and pictures will be posted at Simsbury Patch, Twitter, @JoanCo, and on Facebook. And that's the only email that I received for public comment. And I just wanted to confirm that there was no one who joined our meeting to speak in person. No? Okay. That concludes public audience. And we have a presentation now from Maria Capriola, Town Manager. And this is our first opportunity to learn about the Town Manager's proposed budget for the fiscal year 2021-2022. So I'll turn it over to you, Maria.
Great, Eric, thank you so much. But if we could just pause for one moment. I think we had one resident who had submitted an additional public comment. I just want to double check quickly on it, if you'll give me just one moment.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Because I comment on everything, apparently, Eric. Yeah, S&P, the rating agency, is kind of the expert in financial health. So I'm comfortable with my assertion that our management is pretty outstanding when it comes to the financials of this community.
Agreed.
And remind me, the chief took over in what, 19? Right, Eric?
I know I came here in 17 and he was hired not too long after that. So
it was 18. Yeah, I can't remember.
2018.
Okay. Sometimes the years run together for me.
Actually, the last two.
There's been a lot. I do miss you guys, though. We were commenting, right? The last time we've all really seen each other was that meeting in March 17th. You're right, Wendy.
You guys ever had these super blueberries? Like this big?
Oh, that's a big blueberry, though, dude. That's
like they cost like, I'm just killing airtime here, but they cost like, I'll probably get a letter about this, but they cost like twice as much, but they are definitely worth it. It's just antioxidant purposes. I'm trying to give health tips to the public. That's just, I'm a big proponent of these.
I mean, they are like 3 or 4 times the size of a normal blueberry. So if they only cost twice as much, you're getting your money's worth there.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we do have one additional comment that had come in just about a month ago. I apologize that we had initially forgotten to flag it, but the person is out of the country and had asked if we could read it this evening. So I just forwarded that to you, Eric. If we could loop back to that, and then I'll be happy to jump into the presentation. Thanks.
Okay. I just want to make sure I've got the person's name. Okay, this is an email we received from Chris Evans, and it's directed to Simsbury elected officials. The purpose of this letter is to emphasize my support for the capital project request relating to the safety concerns at the intersection of Notch Road and West Mountain Road. I started working with the police department in October 2019, and they eventually put me in contact with Tom Roy in April 2020. I've been working with Tom ever since and fully support his permanent intersection redesign, as well as the funding requirements necessary to complete this project. The temporary intersection redesign that was implemented this past fall was a huge success. Furthermore, I've been working with my neighborhood, and they also support this redesign. I've encouraged them to contact you to demonstrate support. As an Army National Guard soldier with 27 plus years of service and 3 deployments, safety has always been at the forefront of everything I do. When we moved to One Notch Road about 12 years ago, we accepted the safety issues that came along with living on a busy road. Over the years, there have been way too many near misses to count. In October of 2019, I had another near miss and finally decided that it was time to take action. Furthermore, Notch Road will have a few new drivers in the coming months, to include my daughter. As you would expect, young drivers don't have the skills necessary to avoid the many near misses. Thank you for your time to read this. I hope to be home for my third deployment in time to join the budget meeting in person or virtually. Stay safe and stay healthy. Chris Evans. And Chris, thank you for your letter. And of course, thanks for your service. Thanks for pulling that out, Maria. And
thank you. Thanks for your patience.
I suppose that is an appropriate segue into the budget conversation.
It is, very much so. Thank you. I'm just going to pull up the presentation. Okay, can everyone see that all right?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Very good. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present my fiscal 21-22 proposed budget to you all this evening. Before I really get into the presentation, I do want to thank and recognize a few key staff members. Amy Merriweather, our finance director, Melissa Appleby, our deputy town manager, Tom Fitzgerald, our management specialist, and the entire leadership team. I couldn't do this without them, and their hard work and dedication is just very much appreciated. All right. So as we were developing the budget, I had 4 key objectives in mind that were of importance to me. One was to maintain current services and programs. I had not heard otherwise from the Board of Selectmen that you were looking for any service reductions. I think our municipal services are more important now than they ever have been in our current pandemic environment. And so this budget also helps us to adapt our services in our current pandemic environment. And as you'll see later in the presentation, I think we did a very good job of minimizing tax increases, given the fact that many of our businesses and property owners and homeowners are still experiencing some financial hardship associated with the pandemic. Second, I think we were able to advance a number of Board of Selectmen initiatives and priorities, such as financial management, professional development, parks and recreation, infrastructure, and economic development. Third, we had a focus on maintaining and investing in our existing assets and infrastructure. So we've continued to focus on our cash to capital model for our ongoing and routine capital needs. I'm really pleased to announce that we have built and developed a 6-year technology plan, which is reflected in the CNR fund. I really want to credit Rick Bazzano, our IT manager, and Melissa for their work on that. I think it was really important for our organization to have that. That's a first for us. But I think it's going to help us, again, ensure that our employees have the right tools that they need to be successful. And then also a key objective under this for me was refining our capital budgeting based upon the final results of the Parks and Open Space Master Plan, as well as having the preliminary results of our town facilities master plan. And a fourth key objective was strengthening our long-term financial stability. So we wanted to maintain or increase fund balance. Based on our projections, as we'll see later in the presentation, I expect that we'll be able to increase our fund balance. We wanted to maintain our health insurance fund reserve at least 12 weeks of expected claims to ensure we were the equivalent of being fully insured. You may recall that's very important since as a town, we are self-insured and we do not have aggregate stop loss. So making sure the reserves are set appropriately is quite important to our financial health. I wanted to make sure that we are maintaining our commitment to funding our actuarial liabilities for our OPEB and pension contributions. And another project we had mentioned last budget cycle that we were able to engage in is that we wanted to analyze the methodology for the charges to funds outside of the general fund, really to ensure the appropriateness of those charges to those funds. So a quick snapshot of the general fund budget as proposed. The town budget's a little under $24 million. The Board of Ed budget, this reflects some new information on health insurance that we just received on Friday afternoon. So the superintendent will be going into that in more detail with his board tomorrow evening. But in total, the general fund as proposed would be a little over $105 million. And these are just some of the other key funds that we have. So a snapshot of our anticipated general fund revenues for the upcoming year. Property taxes will make up a little over 91% of our overall revenue. That is not uncommon for Connecticut. In terms of our statutory ability to diversify our revenue base, it's very limited in Connecticut. So you may often hear that in Connecticut, we have an over-reliance on the property tax. As you can see, it is the main source of revenue for the upcoming year. The next main source of revenue is intergovernmental revenue at 6%, and that's largely the ECS grant that we receive for education. So some really phenomenal and remarkable news to share regarding our grand list. We were able to officially certify the grand list today, and the grand list has increased by 2.94%. or a little over $73 million, which will generate about $2.7 million in new revenue. Grand list growth of this amount, again, is just remarkable. This is our second consecutive year of incredibly strong growth. You'll remember for the current year we're sitting in, the grand list growth was around 2.66%. So again, just wonderful to see the continued interest in our town, both residential development and investment, as well as commercial development and investment. And I very much want to thank Francine Beland, our assessor, and her team. They worked so hard to really capture that new growth that happened over the last year, and are trying to get through a backlog of new growth that had happened in prior years that hadn't been captured. And they just, again, I just can't speak enough to how much hard work they put into this grand list. And again, this is just remarkable. I'm so glad to be able to share this news with you all. In terms of the real estate, it's increased by 1.6%. Some of the primary drivers there were the new construction of the Big Y building, as well as some of the apartment style complexes that are still under construction. Our motor vehicle valuation increased by 7.2%, and personal property increased by 21.8%. Two significant drivers there were the expansion of Curaleaf, as well as completion of the Tobacco Valley Solar Project. So we wanted to provide you just with a historic snapshot over the last 10 years of how our grand list growth has looked, because I think this helps tell the story of just how remarkable the last 2 years have been. So what we've highlighted here, the numbers in red reflect revaluation years. So we have a revaluation year where we had nearly a 14% decrease in the grand list. Another one, I think this is my very first budget with you all. We had a little over 6% in grand list growth due to revaluation. But as you can see, looking back, many years and non-reval years, the grand list growth might have varied from being flat to a slight negative, and at best was a 1% increase. So again, to have 2 consecutive years now, in excess of 2.5%, closer to 3%. Truly remarkable. Some of the statistics we're seeing from some of our towns in the region are grand list growth numbers in the range of about 0.9% to around 1.4%. So in many cases, we're double or more than double grand list growth that our neighboring communities are seeing. In terms of our revenue outlook and for budgeting purposes, we did use a tax collection rate of 98.5%. Our tax collection revenues have remained stable despite the pandemic. The tax collection rate of 98.5% is the budgeting assumption that the Board of Finance does prefer for us to use. You may recall actual collections are around 99.5%. And as a result of that, we are able to make a planned contribution to fund balance, and we will go over that later in the presentation. The town clerk's office has seen some revenue growth during the pandemic, which is largely due to a large amount of homeowners refinancing their mortgages due to the low interest rates at the moment. We did take a look at the historic averages for our revenues for both the conveyance tax and land recording fees. When we took a look at that analysis, we actually did not include the current fiscal year to date because of the significant uptick that was due to the pandemic. But based on prior years, we felt very comfortable increasing our budgeted estimates for conveyance tax by $50,000 to $450,000. And we felt comfortable budgeting an increase of $10,000 for our land recording fees. Our building permit revenues, both residential and commercial, again, continue to remain strong. I think we're seeing that in the grand list growth numbers. Again, we took a look at our historic average, and our 6-year average was just under $800,000. We did not include fiscal year to date or Tobacco Valley solar permitting revenues in that analysis to ensure that we could be conservative in our projections, and felt comfortable budgeting an increase of $225,000 for that particular revenue source. We are anticipating a very modest revenue loss in the rental fees that we will often collect at our various sites. Due to the pandemic, we are not holding public events yet at this time, so we've budgeted for that potential revenue loss. And the one area where we have seen a decrease in revenue is our interest income. That's decreased by about $350,000. So we have adjusted accordingly. The positive side of things is that some of our other local revenues have been strong and will help to offset that budgeted decrease. Some further budgeting assumptions for our revenue outlook. The motor vehicle mill rate, as proposed, will be the same mill rate as our real estate and personal property. The state cap on the mill rate for motor vehicles does remain at 45 mills, but at this time our mill rate is substantially lower than that, so that should not be a problem for us. We also, as we have done in years past, we have utilized the governor's proposed budget numbers for projecting our state revenues. And at this time, we have budgeted the ECS number flat. And in regards to potential pandemic relief funds, we're really uncertain at this time if we will receive additional state or federal monies for pandemic relief. Tentatively, we are hearing that non-entitlement communities in Hartford County may receive in aggregate about $174 million. Those funds would be passed to us by the state, and they would get the funding from the federal government. And as a non-entitlement community, those are communities with populations of less than 50,000, which we fall into. So we will continue to monitor this and report back when we have better information. So moving on to our expenditures, you can see here that the education budget reflects around 71% of our total operating expenses. Again, that is not unusual at all for Connecticut. The remaining 29% of the budget reflects the cost of providing municipal services, as well as our debt service and our capital and capital non-recurring funds. And our debt service does also include both town and Board of Education projects. So a high-level snapshot of where our increases are. Here you can see that the town government increase is estimated in expenditures at around 2.49%. And overall, looking at a total budgetary increase of around 2.9%. Some key expenditure trends that were part of this budget. Again, debt service for the third consecutive year is our largest budget driver. Salaries, we did budget for anticipated general wage and step increases for our employees. We do have a combination of contracts that are settled as well as open contracts. So where those funds are budgeted vary a bit depending on the union group. So some of those salary increases are budgeted within the salary line items. For example, our AFSCME employees and our dispatcher employees where the contracts have been settled. Other employee groups whose contracts are open, we have budgeted funds in contingency. To err on the side of caution, we have budgeted funds that are consistent with statewide settlement data that we're seeing. The minimum wage impact of the statutory increase that we'll be experiencing in the upcoming fiscal year is just over $39,000 in aggregate. That's across all departments and all funds of the town. And our pension and OPEB increase this year is a little over $153,000. That's about 0.15% of our town budget increase. I do want to note that as proposed, This budget doesn't reflect any change in assumptions. I think we're going to have a really good policy conversation around that on Budget Workshop Day. A few points I would just like to note that, our actuaries as well as our pension advisors have said that we do not need to accomplish all of those assumptions all in one chunk. We can certainly take a gradual approach, which is in fact what myself and our finance director would recommend. We also completed our financial benchmarking update recently and found that OPEB, which this is not surprising, we are far ahead of the curve in terms of how well funded we are. And in terms of our pension plan, doing better than most of our counterparts in the region as well. Some other expenditure trends for us. The health district is proposing an assessment increase of a little over $15,000. You may recall that we are billed on a proportional basis for our population. So since our population increased this year, that was part of the increase that we are seeing. Based on what we've been spending for legal expenses for labor, we've also proposed a $25,000 increase to that line item. We also recently acquired a standalone cyber insurance policy for the Town and Board of Education. We had coverage under our general policy through our carrier, KERMA. There have been some recent developments in that market, and this was something that we needed to pursue. I know we spoke a little bit about it during the recent technology update in regards to our cybersecurity update. And Melissa and Rick will be able to talk about that a bit more on Budget Workshop Day. Another item that we were trying to capture and appropriately budget for, we have AEDs located in many of our town buildings. They have been used. They have helped save lives. They're really important to ensure that we're maintaining properly. So we have budgeted for battery replacements for those items. Another expenditure trend were some increases in public safety and the costs that I'm about to cover. It's not all inclusive, but it is, I would say, again, some of the key budget drivers for public safety. And many of these, as you'll see, are some expenditure drivers that we really have very, very little control over. But for police overtime, this is year 3 of our 3-year plan to gradually increase the overtime by $25,000 a year in order to reflect the actual spend that we had for that cost. Dispatch overtime, the $7,000 increase, again, reflects historical spend. We have also been notified that the post certification, so that is the academy that our new officers go to learn how to become a police officer and become certified, the cost of that has increased. Cruiser acquisition, those costs have increased as well, equipment and supplies. And then we do have 2 items that were part of the recent legislation, state legislation that will impact us, that are new expenses, but will be recurring on an ongoing basis now. One of them is state mandated officer assessments. So approximately a fifth of our workforce on an annual basis will be receiving these assessments. And body cameras. So you may recall we expedited this project to tap into an old grant where we could get a higher level of reimbursement for the initial acquisition. But there is a recurring cost in terms of operating costs, maintenance costs, and again, future replacement of the cameras. And for the upcoming year, we're anticipating that cost to be around $46,000. Another area of an expenditure trend for us is the Parks and Recreation budget. And 2 main issues, in addition to our analysis of the revenue fund, really came to our attention. One is how we are budgeting for agricultural supplies to maintain our various fields throughout our parks. And we found a structural issue with our existing special revenue fund for athletic fields. So we have been collecting a fee per player from our various youth sports organizations in town that has gone into the special revenue fund to help maintain the fields and such. We were charging approximately $9,000 for many, many, many years, but charging approximately $9,000 to that fund for routine agricultural supplies. So things like grass seed and fertilizer, these are supplies regardless of the youth sports playing on those fields that we would need to purchase in order to properly maintain those fields and playing surfaces in good condition. As you can imagine, youth sports, like many other facets of our life, were impacted by the pandemic. And we received very little in funds this past year. So that special revenue fund has essentially been decimated. And it does not have sufficient funds to support the agricultural supplies that, again, we need to purchase just to maintain our fields. These aren't special projects or sort of above and beyond requests that the youth sports may ask of us, but this is just basic regular maintenance of our fields. So we have budgeted $9,000 for agricultural supplies an additional $9,000 in agricultural supplies in the parks budget. The next item, overcharging the revenue fund. So this comes back to the analysis that we wanted to engage in to determine if the charges, in particular to the sewer fund and Parks and Recreation Fund for some of these items, as you see here, to see if those were appropriate. And we were very fortunate. We had some information from our actuaries and our insurance carrier. And at a staff level, Amy, Melissa, and I continued to do some analysis. And we found that we had been, in some instances, pretty significantly overcharging the Parks and Recreation Revenue Fund for costs that weren't attributable to the fund. So I think this is very important. I'm glad we identified this issue. I think it's important that we correct the issue to ensure equity for our program participants in recreation programs. But based on our analysis, we believe that the pension account in the revenue fund was being overcharged by about $30,000. LAP insurance by about $2,500, the workers' compensation insurance line item by about $20,000. So again, we've made those corrections. We have reduced in the proposed budget the revenue fund line items for those particular items, and we've reallocated those expenses to the general fund where they should be charged. Similarly, we found that for some reason our phone system for parks and recreation we're being charged to the revenue fund. None of our other departments organization-wide are paying for their phones separately, and we do have a centralized account in the general fund for phones. So again, this is moving that expense to the general fund. And then lastly, our medical equipment loan locker has been an absolute success, and they are very happy to host them up at the Apple Barn location. But again, in fairness to our recreation users, the utilities associated with keeping that space going for them is a little over $1,700. So again, felt that was an appropriate expense for the general fund to pick up as opposed to our recreation participants. So as I mentioned earlier, we are looking at about a 2.49% increase to town government. You may recall in November at the Tri-Board meeting, the Board of Finance had asked us to try and reach an expenditure increase of around 1.5%. So we are in excess of that guidance. We would need to find about an additional $250,000 to decrease in our budget, should you want to try and meet that guidance. Again, if we want to move in that direction, I would be seeking policy guidance from you all. That's a substantial amount of money for our municipal budget, and it would require some sort of service reductions and some tough policy choices. So in regards to service restorations and service improvements, because we were about 1% over the Board of Finance guidance, I didn't feel comfortable including service restorations or improvements in the proposed budget at the onset. But again, I think we'll have some good policy conversations on this at Budget Workshop today. And based on all of the requests that we received, I have prioritized those requests that I think are most important for the organization and would ask, again, if things are potentially added into the budget, that these would be given priority for consideration. And the first priority are 3 items I would characterize as service restoration requests. So these are items that over time had been cut from our budget and had not been restored. One is the Parks Facility Maintenance Technician position. You may recall that the Parks and Recreation Department lost 3 Parks staff members in the mid-2000s. Those positions were not restored. And our Parks and Open Space Master Plan identified a need to add about 2 to 3 parks staff members in order to properly keep up with the maintenance in our parks. Second is professional development dollars for our parks staff members of about $2,500. They have to maintain a number of certifications, such as playground inspection certification, pesticide application, There's many others. And we had many staff members who were certified who have since retired. And unfortunately, the money was pulled out of the budget. And we've reached a point due to retirements that it's really important to make sure that we're investing in our current staff and making sure we have people on staff with the proper certification. So that's something, again, that would be important to add back into the budget. And the third item would be year 2 of the 2-year plan to increase our funding for library materials. You may recall that the second allotment of money as proposed, this $8,000 was specifically for the children's materials, as we added in funding for the adult materials and teen materials with the last budget cycle. And something just to share, I know that one of the pieces that was part of this conversation last year is that we are so grateful to the Friends of the Library for the generous contributions they make and how reliant we had become on their donations to essentially supplement our materials budget. And then, of course, the pandemic happened and they were not able to hold their book sale. And they were able to give us, I believe it was about half of what they ordinarily would. So if we hadn't increased our budget, we would have been in a very, very difficult position because this materials budget is not only print materials, but it's our digital content as well. In terms of prioritizing service improvement requests, so these would be items or services that are new to our budget. I would absolutely love us to consider some training for police. They've proposed doing de-escalation training. That cost would allow staff the time to be able to participate in that training. And the Spirit Council Data Collection and Analysis Project, if we could fully fund that effort and initiative, there's definitely, I think, a lot of value in that. The third piece, and this is, I think, really entrepreneurial, and it would be a cost to be determined because we're still working through this a little bit, but would be some temporary staffing for our assessor's office in order to continue to generate revenue and new growth. As I mentioned, we have a lot of backlog in terms of years in which field inspections weren't conducted for building permits that had been closed out, whether for residential or commercial purposes. We have a backlog. We would like to get through that backlog. And I think just a snapshot into what an amazing return on investment this has been for us. You may recall you authorized $25,000 for the current budget for contracted field inspections. So in the first 6 months of the year, we spent just under $10,000 on those contracted field inspections. And those inspections generated $103,000 in new revenue for us. So for $10,000, we generated $103,000. Again, a remarkable return on investment. And we know there is much more new growth out there to capture. So again, something we're working through a little bit and hope to have a more vetted proposal for you on Budget Workshop Day. And just to note, if we were to include all of the above service improvements and restorations, that would add to the mill rate about 0.05 mils, or about $12 a year or $1 a month to the median single family home tax bill. In terms of advancing some of the Board of Selectmen initiatives I haven't already spoken to, financial management, this budget reflects our first full year of our permanent shared financial management services arrangement between the town and the Board of Ed. So this is a major accomplishment for us. We've reallocated some funding to provide for some transition planning and staffing due to an upcoming retirement we're going to experience in the finance department. And Amy, Melissa, and I will be working on a potential reorganization or restructuring of that department and may be bringing that forward sometime in the spring. A few other tasks we accomplished. We engaged in long-range capital planning and debt modeling with the town and the Board of Education. We completed the Parks and Recreation Revenue Fund analysis. And we completed the tax dollar utilization and impact on the median valued home. And we'll be getting to that a little bit later in the presentation. And as I mentioned earlier, we did complete our update to our financial benchmarking. It is provided in your budget book under the supplemental tab. And I will say, sometimes I think we get an unfair rap of having the highest mill rate in the Valley, but that's certainly not the case. There were at least 3 towns in our immediate region that had mill rates higher than us. And I think, again, with our strong new growth, heading into this next fiscal year, it's just going to only help our mill rate become even more competitive. In regards to economic development, we have continued funding for Main Street Partnership and the Chamber of Commerce. We have also maintained funding for our Business and Career Center at the library for both the staff member and the digital and print content and databases that are available. And there's a modest amount set aside for our EDC for some of their efforts. In regards to professional development, throughout the budget, we have provided funding to continue education for maintenance of certifications and licenses. We have provided funding to be able to conduct our annual leadership retreat and training for mid and upper level managers, as well as training for essentially larger group work, individual training, tuition reimbursement, and funds for opportunities for executive coaching. We've had several of our members of the leadership team, including myself, engage in that service, and we've just found it incredibly rewarding and beneficial, and we've just been very appreciative of that opportunity. So moving on to our capital budget, this is an overview of our revenues. And as you can see for the capital budget, the source of funding would primarily be bond funding. And this does include both town and Board of Education projects. And you may recall, again, given the onset of the pandemic at the end of our last budget season, we unfortunately removed quite a bit of our cash capacity for capital from our operating budget. As I think it was just a few years back, we had as much as $1.7 million in cash for capital needs, again, to help reduce our borrowing costs in future years. But last year, we only had about $110,000 in excess cash to work with. So we did keep that level funded for the current budget year. Some exceptions to bonding for the capital fund are paving. We do have some funds in our highway budget that we will be transferring out. And some grants, the LoSIP grant and the Town Aid Road money that comes to us. We also, you may recall, received fantastic news about the LoSIP grant that we received to construct the new sidewalk in the North Village. And then also we have some sewer use fees that will be funding some sewer projects. So a quick snapshot at our overall capital budget expenditures. Some of the projects in the capital fund, so you may recall, these are projects that are over $250,000 in value. So we have several projects for the WPCA. The berm improvements, we are awaiting to hear if we will be the recipients of the grant award that we applied for that would pay for around 75 to 80% of the cost of the project. For general government, the Meadowood acquisition, I should have a status update for you, hopefully within the next week or so. In a couple of days, we will be hearing about the status of a major grant that TPL was looking at as part of the funding model that had been proposed as part of this acquisition. This is slightly a little above the 2.2 we presented last year, just as we were refining the project. Added a small number of costs for things such as an appraisal, an environmental review that was conducted, a sign for the park, and some modest parking improvements to the areas in which people would be entering the open space parcel and the trails. For public works, maintaining our roads is incredibly important. So that $1.2 million in funding for that. Sidewalk reconstruction, and again, the new sidewalk / multi-use path in the north end. For culture, parks, and recreation, you may recall in the current CNR budget, we had funds budgeted for a study to assess potential parking solutions at both the Performing Arts Center location and Curtis Park. Due to the wetlands and floodplain issues, that was something we wanted to ensure that we were, thoroughly and properly vetting. That's been completed. And the estimate we have here is about $700,000 to do various parking improvements at the Performing Arts Center / Rotary Park location. So moving on to our CNR budget, and these are for our capital items that are less than $250,000 in revenue. It was very important to us that if not using general fund, essentially cash, that we were using other sources of revenue, whether it's grant funding, user fees, project savings, et cetera, that we really did our best to ensure that we were not bonding for any of these smaller value items. So for the CNR Revenue Fund sources, we have the $416,250 5-year payback method. As I mentioned earlier, this includes $110,000 in cash for capital, which is level funded from the prior year. We have 2 operating budget transfers. One is for one of our very large public works trucks. Those are the ones you often see when they're out plowing during a snowstorm. And an operating transfer for 3 police cruisers to replace those vehicles. I'm also proposing that we use $314,000 in cash from our capital fund reserve. So you may recall at fiscal year end close, through project savings and year-end savings, we were able to make a very healthy contribution of around $2 million into the reserve. In addition to emergency expenses, we had hoped that this would also help to fund, some of our capital needs in cash in the future. So it does reduce borrowing. This would help us to replace some dated and end-of-life items. And utilizing this amount of money would still leave a remaining nearly $1.7 million in the reserve. So again, a very healthy and favorable balance. To date, the only emergency expenditure we have charged to that account, which we came to you all for, was $10,000 for the rotted beam at the ice rink. This is a snapshot of our CNR budgeted expenditures. And this particular budget does not include Board of Education CNR projects. So for the CNR fund projects, just for a bit of visualization tonight, those items that staff is recommending that we utilize the payback method of funding for, we've highlighted in blue. In your budget book, you'll have a very nice one-page snapshot of, again, sort of the breakdown of how we're recommending that we pay for these various items. And for public works, we have a number of proposed equipment and vehicle replacements that are very critical to the work that they do. And we also have the traffic calming project that was mentioned by a member of the public during public audience tonight. We had a very successful temporary traffic calming measure at West Mountain and Notch Road this past summer and into the fall. We would like to make that a permanent arrangement, and that would require some funding to ensure adequate design and proper materials that are more permanent in nature. And this last item is in regards to recycling of materials from road projects, things of that nature. It is not something that Public Works does on an annual basis. It might happen every 2 to 3 years, but felt that it was important to start planning for that and to ensure that we were building up sufficient funds in the CNR so that when we do need to do that project every 2 to 3 to 4 years, that the funds are available. For Culture, Parks, and Recreation, you're going to see here, again, a focus on maintaining our existing infrastructure and replacing a lot of equipment, playscapes, et cetera, that are well beyond their useful life. And so the first item is a proposal to replace the Simsbury Farms playscape that was constructed in the mid-90s. It is now beyond its useful life. It does not meet current code, and it has reached a point that if we do not replace the playscape soon, some of the items will just need to be pulled out until we have funding to do the project. So again, it's had a good life, but it's time for it to be replaced. And it is a very large-scale playscape similar to Rotary Park. It's one of 2 large-scale playscapes that we have. And so the $25,000 we've been setting aside annually for the last few years for the smaller scale playscapes just honestly would not put a dent in this project for us. And that is one of the items that we have also recommended using the capital reserve for. We have a proposal to replace the ice rink chiller. You may recall each year over the last 3 years, we've set aside some funds for significant renovations and improvements to the ice rink. So with this, our rink will be in very, very good shape moving forward. Again, we have some equipment replacements. As part of the master plan, it was noted that we need to begin to replace our irrigation systems throughout town. for our various athletic fields. The first one we are proposing is to replace Memorial Field. And then you will see in your CNR budget for 4 years thereafter that there are additional planned irrigation replacement projects. It also identified work that needs to be done at the golf clubhouse. That renovation had also occurred in the 1990s, and certain things like the HVAC systems and electrical systems have just come due, and it is time. So this is part of a 2-year plan to gradually make some of those renovations and improvements. Again, our commitment to our smaller playscapes, our park entrance signs, again, some of that infrastructure that we're now just budgeting for on an annual basis to ensure that we're replacing things that, for example, the signs that have rotted and deteriorated. An item on here, the parks, the grounds utility vehicle replacement at $25,000. This is a Gator style type vehicle that the staff uses to do work around the Simsbury Farms campus. The current vehicle that they are using is from 1990. It has had a good life, but it is time to retire that vehicle. Some additional projects, we have a gazebo roof replacement at Schultz Park that needs to happen, and some electrical repairs and upgrades at the Simsbury Meadows facility. And the equipment trailer that we're proposing to replace is also from 1990. So I will say that Orlando is just amazing. His team is amazing. They keep things going for a really long time, but it's time to retire this one from service as well. For police, as I mentioned earlier, we have the replacement patrol cruisers. We've also begun formally budgeting for our administrative vehicles. We do have 9 administrative vehicles that are part of our fleet. That is a substantial expense for us. And in order to ensure that we are budgeting properly for those replacements, we needed to include them in the capital plan. And I'm happy to report that we are now doing that. And of course, we also have the body worn cameras and car cameras that I mentioned earlier. For the library, this is part of that technology plan I mentioned earlier. We have developed a replacement cycle for the public terminals at the library. And this would be part of an ongoing plan to build up funding to properly replace those terminals as needed. For general government, we are proposing to purchase a second dial-a-ride van, a replacement vehicle. We do have 2 dial-a-ride vans in our fleet. The first vehicle, we did replace, we are replacing in the current year with a grant. This would be funded 80% by a grant from the state of Connecticut, and the remainder would be funded through our dial-a-ride user fees. Continuing in general government, budgeting for revaluation. Budgeting computer replacements for staff. Again, this is something I'm really proud of the work Melissa and Rick did here in developing a replacement cycle for the staff devices that we need to use and ensuring that we're budgeting appropriately for that, as well as some additional IT projects and some potential any radio system maintenance, et cetera, that may come up as part of our new system that's going to be coming online. We also have in the CNR fund a couple of small projects for sewer. So in regards to our capital and debt service budget model, again, I just want to strongly recommend that we continue to build our capital reserve when we have the opportunity, whether it's through capital project closeouts or year-end savings. And I think it's important that we continue to quantify and build upon our baseline capital needs. The CNR plan as of 3 years ago was brand new. And, when I look at how far we've come and the progress we've made in quantifying those baseline capital needs, I think it's really outstanding work on staff's part. And so again, I think it's just important that we continue to focus on that. And as of last year, our debt modeling does now include planning for those smaller capital items that we need to purchase. In regards to fund balance, we would have a projected fund balance contribution of about $880,000. This is the difference between the budgeted tax collection rate of 98.5% and the anticipated tax collection rate of 99.5%. You would see here that our fund balance would stay most likely in the 16 to 16.5% range. That is a very healthy range for Connecticut municipalities. It is what bond rating agencies are recommending, around the 15 to 17% range. And it's also reflective of our recently updated fund balance policy here at the town. So this is just a quick snapshot of how well our general fund balance has grown over a little over a decade, a little more than a decade now, and that we've consistently, for the last 4 years, kept it in that 16 to close to 17% range. So what would this mean for the median valued single family home in Simsbury? As proposed, the mill rate increase would increase by about 0.17 mils. So from 37.09 mils to 37.26 mils. That mill rate is still lower than where we were 2 budget cycles ago. That would be about a $36 tax increase for the year for a median valued home. On a percentage change basis, it's a tax increase of a little under 0.5%. And this is just a sample of where some of these tax dollars go. So taking, again, our budget and looking at that snapshot. So some highlights from the budget proposal. Again, it is funding current services and programs while adapting to our current environment. It's investing in infrastructure and assets that we currently have and utilizing cash for capital to the extent possible. We are advancing key initiatives that are important to the Board of Selectmen. Some suggested topics for further discussion on Budget Workshop Day are our outside agency funding requests, which are included in quite a bit of detail in your budget books that you will be receiving, and they will be available electronically online beginning tomorrow. Service restorations and improvements, our pension and OPEB trust various assumptions. And the fourth topic, policy topic, I think that's important for us to talk through is the possible use of the capital fund reserve, that $314,000 I proposed for purchasing some of our routine capital items. Some suggested future areas of focus, again, continuing to monitor our intergovernmental revenue. Focusing on that cash to capital model while also completing our townwide facilities master plan. I think it's important for us to continue to gradually build up our contribution to the Parks and Recreation Special Revenue Fund. I did not propose a contribution to the fund this year because of what we discovered and how much we had been overcharging the fund. So effectively, by reducing the revenue fund budget, and appropriately charging the general fund for those expenditures, which were close to $60,000, it's providing relief to the revenue fund. So that is why I did not propose a separate additional contribution to the revenue fund this year. And this was a project we had actually started last spring, and due to the pandemic, we did not have an opportunity to finish it. But I would like for us to revisit evaluating the feasibility of implementing engineering permitting fees, which most of our counterparts have in place, with revenues possibly funding some contracted inspection services of utility work. So as a reminder, we have 2 budget workshops coming up. We have a meeting with the Board of Education on March 2nd at 5 p.m. to discuss their proposed capital plan. And all other budgets we will go over on Budget Workshop Day on March 6th. That will be a virtual event. I will send a note out to Board of Selectmen as a reminder, but if you would like for us to set up a workstation for you here at Town Hall on Budget Workshop Day, we would be very happy to do that for you. And as a reminder, board members are encouraged in advance of budget workshop to please flag items for further discussion, ask questions, and when possible, send them to me in advance. It will help us to expedite responses to you and make budget workshop day as productive as possible for you. Some key dates coming up, additional dates. The Board of Selectmen is tentatively scheduled to adopt the budget on March 8th. If we are unable to complete our work that evening, I would suggest a meeting on March 10th or 11th, which is a Wednesday or Thursday of that same week. And then we will be presenting the Board of Selectmen budget to the Board of Finance on March 16th. And that concludes my presentation this evening. Thank you for your patience. I know this is always a long one and you're so patient, but thank you.
Maria, thank you. And I'll let you get a drink of water while I say a few words. I wanted to thank everybody in your office, in the finance department, all of the department heads, for the work that went into what we're seeing tonight. And what we're seeing tonight is really just a tip of the iceberg. Our budget books, for anyone who hasn't seen them, we're talking about hundreds of pages of detail that's going to be posted online for the public to access and digest in the next day or so. And I'll be linking to that in my first Selectmen's report. As you mentioned, Maria, there's going to be plenty of time to really dig into each department's budget on March 6th, but I did want to see if there were any immediate questions or other thoughts or reflections that board members wanted to share right now.
I just have a general question, Maria. If you could just speak to how the mill rate came to be, not the mill rate, sorry, the 2.9 to the grand list.
Yes,
thank you.
Yeah.
I was caught in all the terms. How that, came out so much higher than projected.
Sure. So, it's really difficult with the grand list to project numbers early on in the process. And I know most assessors are quite loath to give preliminary estimates. And so it was an estimate we had around 1.5% many months back. But again, as we were seeing the continued, strength and development, as we were beginning to really dig through some of the backlog of inspections and the new growth that had been out there, it just all really came together to see, again, that second consecutive year. And again, some of the major contributing factors, I think I mentioned earlier in the presentation. And I think we're going to have a strong year again next year. Well, I'm so sorry, following year based on current activity as well. So really, really good work by Francine and her team in capturing that new growth for us.
Great.
Sean, just a quick one on that. The special revenue fund for the rec items, that was done 8-9 years ago. And it was supposed to be a simpler way to charge or to work with all the youth groups in town. Because in the past, if memory serves you correctly, Jerry Toner was basically allocating bills out. And that was supposed to be a simpler way to collect the fees or agreements that we had with all the groups. So there's documents and such for creating that. So I don't know if that's already been looked into, but there was a bunch of stuff that Culture Parks and Rec did to have that come together. And as my memory serves me correctly, that fund was for the general maintenance of all fields relating to sports in town. So.
Yeah, Sean, thank you for some of that historical perspective. And so certain things, like let's say if maybe one of the youth leagues was looking for, an extra level of service, maybe to get a ball field ready or something of that nature, that we were using that special revenue fund for the athletic fields to charge those expenses to. Yep. Over time, I believe what happened most likely due to tight budgets as more and more of our routine agricultural supplies were being charged there. And again, we determined that about $9,000 in supplies. And so that's for things like, in addition to a sports league coming and asking us to do a special project or, extra level of service for them. So that $9,000 was, again, just routine items. And again, with the lack of revenue coming in, that's where that systemic kind of issue caused a problem for us in the upcoming year.
No, I get it. But if my memory serves me correctly, it wasn't just for the extra stuff. It was for the basic stuff.
Okay,
so,
that's good to know. I will look at that.
There was a bunch of, and again, it's going back a while, but there was a bunch of motions on the specific creation of that because we had the revenue fund didn't exist, I don't believe, prior to, it was 8 or 9 years ago, I think, because Culture Parks and Rec, I was the liaison at the time. There was a subcommittee, there was a whole big discussion on it. And then I had a disagreement with my fellow board members later on about paying for paving in a parking lot out of that fund. Which I didn't believe at the time was one of the intended uses of the money in that fund. So, looks great.
Really good to know. Thank you. That's really helpful.
Yep.
Are there other questions?
Budget books are Wednesday, right? We can get them.
Yes. So town hall is open for walk-in hours Wednesday morning. So they'll be here ready for you first thing. And if any of you, if our walk-in hours aren't convenient for you or you just don't feel comfortable coming to town hall right now, we can certainly make other arrangements to get your hard copies to you. And then the electronic versions of everything will be available online tomorrow.
Cool.
Yeah.
I guess I'd just be remiss if I didn't encourage the public to participate in this process. So this is a month. The crux of the work and the decisions are going to be taking place over the next few weeks. Since I've been, doing this since 2017, I've been really struck by how few members of the public participate in our budget process. In this pandemic reality that we're in, you can email myself or any member of the Board of Selectmen if you'd like your comments read at our upcoming meetings. You can indicate so or email your comments to our town clerk, Erica Butler, and I'll just give her email one more time. It's ebutler@simsbury-ct.gov. Before we move on, are there any other immediate questions for Maria? Okay, thank you so much. More to come.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump into the first Selectmen's report, and I'll begin with an update on the vaccine rollout. Currently, we're in phase 1B of Connecticut's COVID-19 vaccine rollout. Vaccines right now are for people 65 plus and are being scheduled now. Frontline essential workers and people with underlying medical conditions are likely to be scheduled in March. A final definition will be forthcoming about who is a frontline essential worker. It's likely to include healthcare professionals not included in phase 1A, first responders, agricultural workers, food service and restaurant employees, U.S. Postal Service workers, manufacturing workers, grocery and pharmacy workers, public transit workers, and of course, education and childcare workers, among other groups. What I just listed is not exhaustive. COVID-19 vaccinations will be available to eligible members of the general public later this year, likely in the summer timeframe. Vaccine eligibility is determined by the Connecticut State Department of Public Health based on guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, advice from our state's allocation subcommittee, and the governor. The latest information from the state of Connecticut on the vaccine rollout is available on the state's website. If you just Google Connecticut COVID-19, you'll get taken right to the page. To register for the vaccine, you can do so online at ct.gov/COVID vaccine. If you have an email address, if you don't have an email address, there's a phone number you can call. CVS Health also is administering the vaccine at select locations, including the location in Avon for residents 65 and older. At the moment, you can make an appointment by going directly to CVS's website. The town has been receiving between 50 and 100 calls per day from residents who found the process for scheduling a vaccine confusing. Our Senior Center and Social Services Department is prepared to assist. You can call 860-658-3273 if you or someone you know needs assistance with this process. We're here to help. In the version of this report that I send out by email, I'll have a bunch of links to both the PowerPoint that Maria covered, as well as the more exhaustive budget book document, and that'll be posted shortly on the town's website. Just to reiterate some key dates in the process, we have a meeting on March 2nd with the Board of Education to talk about their capital priorities. March 6th is the Board of Selectmen's all-day budget workshop starting at 9 a.m. March 16th, the Board of Selectmen will be presenting its proposed budget to the Board of Finance, and that meeting starts on the 16th at 5:45 p.m. The first Thursday of each month, the Spirit Council hosts a panel discussion and a Q&A on topics around diversity and inclusion in our town. On March 4th, the conversation will turn to Women's History Month. The conversation is scheduled 6:30 to 8 p.m. The event is free, and to receive the Zoom link, please register in advance on the library's website. You'll see a place under virtual programs to sign up. Lastly, 2021, this year, marks 25 years since the Old Drake Hill Flower Bridge became the Flower Bridge. The bridge dates back to the late 1800s, and in the early 1990s was closed to vehicle traffic. Then in 1995, it was restored as a pedestrian bridge, and for the past quarter century has been adorned by boxes of flowers each summer, thanks to the dedicated volunteers of the Old Drake Hill Flower Bridge Committee. It's a nonprofit organization. This year, the plantings will be bigger and better than ever. The group will be adding 20 additional boxes and border column baskets that are planted in conjunction with the Simsbury Garden Club and the Connecticut Master Gardener Program. And if it's safe to do so, the committee hopes to hold its annual Burgers on the Bridge fundraiser at some point in September. If people wish to get involved, to volunteer, make a donation, join the waiting list to sponsor a basket, please reach out to Shireen Wassel, 860-658-5377, or Deke McKay, 860-658-2377. I'll turn it over to Maria with the Town Manager's Report.
Great. Thanks, Eric. A quick coronavirus update for you all. Our positive cases for the 2-week period per 100,000 residents came all the way down to 15.4. So you may recall, based on the COVID municipal alert system, a case rate of 15 COVID cases per 100,000 residents is considered red alert status. So we're really close to coming back down to the orange alert status. We haven't been there since prior to the Thanksgiving holidays. It was kind of late October, November-ish timeframe where we started to see some changes in that regard. So really great to see our numbers coming down again for the third consecutive week. Our COVID positivity rate came down to 2.6% from 3.2% over the prior 2-week period. We're currently at 54 positive cases over our most recent 2-week period ending February 13th. That's a decrease from 72 cases the prior 2-week period. And again, as I mentioned, this is a really significant decrease for us. It was about a 25% decrease over the week prior. Some preliminary data that we have from the state ending February 16th is reporting that a little over 3,700 of our Simsbury residents have received at least their first dose of the vaccine. That's just under 15% of our population. The Farmington Valley Health District is currently holding 3 vaccination clinics in the Valley. And vaccinations, as Eric mentioned, are now also available at the CVS in Avon. I really want to thank Wendy. She has been volunteering her time to help our seniors get registered for the vaccine and to help provide a little bit of relief to our social services staff. About half, it's a very small but mighty department, and about half of those staff members have been almost exclusively doing this work at the moment. So we're just so grateful to Wendy and her volunteering her time to help out our residents and our staff. Like many of our businesses and organizations, we are still seeing impacts from COVID. For the month of February, we've had 7 staff members quarantined, but fortunately, no positive cases thus far. The library town hall do currently remain open for limited walk-in hours. Lisa Cream, the library director, and I are in the process of evaluating extending library hours for one evening. We are working through that and are hoping to do that in the near future, and we'll be reporting back on that soon. And in regards to our monthly food distribution program to help our residents experiencing food insecurity, our social services team served 123 households at the most recent distribution. They were able to provide 38 additional bags to families with children, and they delivered to 28 homebound individuals. So there are many volunteers that are helping our social services staff with that. And again, just want to thank everybody for their efforts. One item that came out right before this meeting, and I don't think Eric may have had a chance to see it, the governor made a change to the potential schedule for folks being eligible to vaccine, and it looks like we'll be switching to an age-based system. We just got that information right before this meeting, so we will definitely be working, as a team to help get that new information out.
Maria, the information that I shared was on the state's website this morning. And as I finished reading my report, someone texted me and said, uh-oh, there's been an update.
Just changed, like literally just changed. Yes. And just a couple of quick news and announcements from our departments. Some really fantastic news to report. We were able to take advantage of the low interest rates right now, and we refinanced a bond that we had for the sewer department from a Clean Water Fund loan that we had taken out some number of years ago. That recent refinancing is going to save us an estimated $392,000, and that's net of our bond issuance costs. So I'm really grateful to Phoenix Advisors. They are our bond advisors, to Amy Merriweather and Tony Piazza, Melissa, Tom Roy, everybody who helped to make that happen. Very, very grateful to the team for their work on that. That's substantial savings for our users. I would like to congratulate our town clerk, Erica Butler. She has been elected vice president of the Hartford County Town Clerks Association. Her term will start in April. It will be for a 2-year period, and just really want to congratulate her on a very well-deserved appointment. And then lastly, our planning director, Mike Liddon, will be presenting a development update to the Simsbury Chamber of Commerce membership this Friday, February 26th at 8 a.m. Due to the pandemic, this will be a virtual event, and it's replacing their annual legislative breakfast, which would typically have been held in February and would have been in person. I think it's going to be an informative presentation. It will be very similar to development updates that he has provided to the Economic Development Commission. He did provide one recently to them, and that is available online. And I hope folks will be able to join us for this one as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Moving on now to Selectmen action. We'll begin with tax refund requests. Item A. Is there a motion effective February 22nd, 2021 to approve the presented tax refunds in the amount of $8,239.92 and to authorize Town Manager Maria Capriola to execute the tax refunds?
So moved.
Second.
Oh, I think I heard Jackie there. Is there any further conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Item B, this is a really cool one. This is lighting upgrades, a loan agreement. By moving to more efficient lighting at Town Hall, the library, and Simsbury Farms, the town's expected to save more than $40,000 a year. So the item tonight we're being asked to approve is a loan agreement. It would be a no-interest loan that the town would pay back using the savings from this project. And I think it's a neat project. Maria, would you mind elaborating a bit on how this works and how this would be, the upgrades would be paid for?
Sure. And I'll probably ask Tom to jump in as well. But, really want to commend Tom for his work and his effort in this. But essentially, the lighting upgrades would be a return on investment, depending on the town building, about a 2 to 3 year period. And that we have the opportunity, rather than paying for those modifications up front, but to essentially pay for them through our billing that we get on a monthly basis through the savings. So paying for it through the savings. It's something Tom had done, I believe, a similar project or a few projects of this nature many years back. Again, think that this is a really good opportunity for us to improve our energy efficiency. We're definitely interested in pursuing some similar projects at the bandshell and some other places. So I think this may be the first in a series of loan agreements you may see come before you. But Tom, is there anything you would like to add on this project?
No, I think you kind of hit the key points. We have done this before, and it's interesting that in less than a decade, the lighting technology has gotten so much better that we're able to do these fairly expensive programs with no out-of-pocket expense and very reasonable return on investment. So it's kind of a real win-win in terms of what we can do.
Yeah, Tom, thanks for your work on this, bringing this to us. Are there questions from the board that we can answer? Okay. Is there a motion effective February 22nd, 2021 to authorize Town Manager Maria Capriola to execute agreements with Eversource for each of the 3 lighting upgrade projects as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Right. Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. Item C is the renewal of the Stoddard Dam Reservoir lease agreement with the Simsbury Fish and Game Club. The license agreement extension is in your packets tonight. Maria, would you, I think there's probably 2 important things to cover. One, is there anything new that you would highlight in this agreement that's a departure from the current agreement? And two, could you talk about your current thinking around some of the significant work that's likely going to be needed in future years around the dam?
Wait. Did you miss the golf course?
Did I?
Yes.
Oh. It's C. It's the third item.
I picked the wrong one.
Sorry, just keeping us on track.
No, thank you. My apologies. Hold on. Getting there. Thanks for keeping me honest.
Tom's sitting there waiting.
I didn't mean to skip you, Tom.
See, Tom, I'm looking out.
Yeah, so this item C should have been the proposed 2021 Simsbury Farms golf course fee schedule. This is a minor issue, but an important one to fix because some of the numbers that were shared in the last packet, I believe the issue was that they were cut off. Tom, is that something you can elaborate on?
Yeah, I think when I saved the file to send to the administrators, I think I might hit the space bar and something, and it just missed it. The label got the label was removed, but the information and the numbers was there. So I apologize for the oversight.
Okay, so the corrected schedule is in the packets that went out late last week. Any questions from the board? Okay. See if I can find the motion. Is there a motion effective February 22nd, 2021 to approve the 2021 fee schedule for the Simsbury Farms Golf Course as revised and presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Thanks, Tom. And back to the Stoddard Dam, the lease agreement with the Simsbury Fish and Game Club. Maria, I had asked about any changes with the lease agreement and also to talk a little bit about the capital project with the dam that would be taking place in future years.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Eric. So again, want to thank both Orlando and Tom Tyberski for their assistance in helping me to update this agreement. So there are a number of housekeeping updates to the agreement, but we also added a section regarding maintenance expectations for the area, maintenance that we are expected to perform, maintenance that the club is expected to perform. We also included the reimbursement arrangement for the portalet that we provide on a seasonal basis to the pond. We also added some additional language regarding the town's right to terminate the lease if we had some sort of emergency or exigent type of circumstances that was going to require repair work to the dam. Just wanted a clear understanding that we could terminate very quickly in those circumstances. So I think that those are probably the key changes. We also updated, as part of the housekeeping updates, the insurance and indemnification language. But again, all in all, with Melissa's help on that, and again, as I mentioned, Tom and Orlando's help, I think the agreement is much improved. They have been great stewards of the property. So we are proposing another 5-year lease with them. What's interesting about this particular location is that the dam was constructed based on some information that Jeff was able to share around 1903, based on historical accounts. The only documented repairs that we are able to find were completed in 1975. So it is a structure that's quite aging, and it doesn't meet current standards for dams. There was a dam inspection in 2017. And I believe an update conducted in 2019. The dam is in fair condition at this time. However, we do anticipate at some point in the future, 5-6 years out, maybe longer, we may find ourselves in a position, if the dam does have some sort of substantial failure, that we would find ourselves faced with one of two choices. And this is based on state regulations, where we would either have to bring the dam up to modern code, which would be a very expensive project in excess of $3 million, or potentially breaching the dam, which would be more in the range of $1.1 to $1.2 million. We have put a placeholder project in this and the furthest year of the capital plan. It has shown up in prior years. Again, we don't want us to lose sight of it because, at some point in the future, we will have to make that decision. We do have some other small dam type structures and things on some of our parcels throughout town. And Jeff and Tom Tyberski will most likely be making a presentation to you all sometime in the fall, just to help educate you on this topic, raise some awareness about it. Again, none of these things are in imminent danger of collapsing or failing, but again, just want to sort of put that on your radar, because in the future you will have some pretty important policy decisions to make on those topics. I don't know, Tom or Jeff, if you have anything you'd like to add.
No, I think that's it in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from the board?
Could we hold like a fundraiser where somebody could win the right to breach the dam for us, so we didn't have to pay $1 million? It just seems like an absurd amount of money to remove some concrete from a structure that isn't operating anymore, but we can deal with that when the time comes.
So
I don't know if you recall that when they removed the dam over at Rainbow,
yeah,
in Terriffill, it was $1 million, and it was nothing but a concrete structure. So
yeah, no,
I know what it costs.
You got to protect. I get it. It's all the remediation stuff because you can't hurt the area.
Right.
It's a lot more than just removing the concrete. I know that, but it's just when people ask, this is some of the stuff we have to do. It's challenging.
Yeah.
Well, Sean, wait for the Teller Dam. So
we don't own that land, right?
But I can just imagine that project scope. Quick question though, Marie, this is basics. When I was reading it earlier, if we breach it, then the water goes away and the fish go away and the Fish and Game Club have no place to be, right? So if, in your planning for this and conversations, if that is the eventuality, it'd be nice if we talked with them and Tom and possibly identified some other place to relocate them. Because it's a phenomenally successful club, and it's one that people don't know about in town. I believe it's capped around 100 participants, and it's focused on youth conservation. Mike, your beautiful face just came up, so maybe you've got some comments. But so just maybe that's something to have in the back of our mind as we plan strategically.
Yeah, very good points, Chris. I know that Tom, I believe, and please correct me if it's Tom and Jeff or just Tom, have had some conversations to alert them to this issue, and that we may down the road need to talk about some options.
Yeah. Are there other questions? Okay. Is there a motion effective February 22nd, 2021, to authorize Town Manager Maria Capriola to execute the proposed lease agreement for use of the Stoddard Dam Reservoir by the Simsbury Fish and Game Club, Inc.?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. We have no appointments and resignations tonight. Review of minutes. Any feedback on the minutes from our regular meeting on February 8th? Any feedback on the minutes from our special meeting on February 8th? Okay, well done. Then those minutes will stand. Are there any Selectmen liaison or subcommittee reports that anyone wanted to share?
I would just share a couple of things on the Board of Ed. They're meeting tomorrow night for their budget adoption meeting, I believe, 223. They met and approved or adopted the 6-year capital plan on the 9th. And in it, they included the Latimer Lane renovate as new, and not included the Henry James piece. And the cost over once the state grants come in is around $25 million to the town. The other two items that were included was a security, I think it was technology security, and the bleachers again are back. And then you change, Maria, I saw the number changed on the budget, which is now 73.8 mil as opposed to 74.9. And There's a new position in the plan for a director of equity and access. That's part of their budget. And that's it. The other thing I wanted to say is the aging and disability. I left our meeting last time or the Board of Finance meeting to go there. And I mentioned the town facilities plan and the Eno and the Apple Barn deal. So there were people, I think people were going to have a lot to say about that. And I know we were going to look back at what was said historically, but there was a lot of interest in that conversation. So more to come on that.
Thanks, Wendy.
Yep.
Any other updates anyone want to share?
Just a quick one, Eric. At Public Safety, Maria did take over the second half for me. Thank you, Maria. But at the first half, I did bring up that we are going to be looking to have a tabletop exercise surrounding a cyber breach response in the upcoming months. So more to come on that. But just a follow-up item I know of interest between our board and the Board of Finance. So.
Good. Thanks, Sean. Mike, did you raise your hand?
I did. I wanted to thank the board. At our last meeting, we gave a proclamation for Mrs. Schwartz, and I was able to deliver that. And it was really cool, both from a personal level, but also she was just so thrilled. And I just wanted to thank everybody.
Thanks for sharing that, Mike. That's great. Okay. Any other updates? Okay, so I'm paranoid now about not following the agenda. So, communications. Were there any questions about any of the memos in the communication section?
Is Tom Roy still on? I would love to talk about MS4 for the next hour and a half.
Oh, Sean, you're just talking my language here.
Now, I did read it because I often shoot from the hip on this topic, but it is interesting that the level of detail that your department and the inspectors go through. This is something that folks don't really know about, right? And that there's a lot of water that goes into our water that eventually makes it into our drinking system. So there's a lot of inspection and a lot of work that goes on to make sure that, those culverts and et cetera on the side of our properties that nobody cares about, they do matter, right? And you guys are maintaining and inspecting those. So we don't need to get into the state regulations and otherwise, but I thought a good chance to remind residents that it's more than just snow plows and paving. There's a lot more that you guys do down there. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
Good call out, Sean.
I was going to give a call out. I thought the write-up by Kristen with Tom on the dial-a-ride was a great, analysis on everything and makes a lot of sense what they put together.
Yeah, I appreciate the time that went into looking at the feasibility of this.
Yep.
Thank you. I feel like we really took our time looking into it and looked at all the aspects of what would and wouldn't work for the program. And I think that we made a pretty good recommendation to you based on facts. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer, but I'm also very happy with the way that it came together. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I thought it was very thorough. Were there any questions for Kristen?
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else before we adjourn? Is there a motion?